I'm going to go ahead and play the clip here from Bioware co-founder Ray Muzyka in just a second, but I do think it's important that we take a good long look at the values that Bioware was founded on and ask whether or not they're still acting as strongly and as clearly on those values as they once were. Is Bioware still truly led by those core values in the same way that they were when they were developing Knights of the Old Republic and Baldur's Gate and Dragon Age Origins? Are they, so to speak, as great as they once were? I think that this clip is very interesting, and I think it's going to maybe remind you of a lot of those things. When I first watched this clip, I was kind of taken aback because I thought, wow, that sounds like the Bioware that we need, and it sounds like the Bioware that a lot of people wish we still had. So I do want to say hello and welcome to the Exalted March, where we talk about Dragon Age, Mass Effect, and Bioware games in general. To set up this clip, it's Ray Muzyka, who is the co-founder of Bioware, who was a VP at Electronic Arts when Bioware was acquired by EA, who is no longer at Bioware, no longer at EA. I think most people kind of know the story of how they were founded and the role that Ray had there. This was at Startup Grind, which is kind of like a startup convention, etc. And he's kind of talking to people about core values and knowing what your core values are at a company. I want to say that this clip is placed at around 2014 as far as when it was recorded. But let's go ahead and have a listen to what he has to say about BioWare and their core values.
Often your core values will be complex and interrelated and even potentially conflicting with one another. For example, these are BioWare's core values, and they may not be the core values that are right for every enterprise. So just an example. But we talked about having quality in our products for our customers, quality in our workplace for our employees, and entrepreneurship or quality on our investment results for our investors in a context of humility and integrity. And there was a lot more discussion we had around each of those words, what it meant and how you lived it and how you made decisions based on it. But if you think about the quality in the products, the quality in the workplace, and the entrepreneurship, they're actually in conflict in some ways. It's like a Venn diagram with three circles, is how I used to draw it. And the sweet spot is in the middle, but that's a very difficult spot to stay in balance. But it's important to do that, I think, because if you're making really high quality products, your customers are going to remain loyal and they're going to continue to buy your products long term, and they're going to be spreading the word, and it's going to be viral. They're going to tell their friends. If you have a very good quality of life, and it's not just a job, but it's a career, it's quality in the workplace, and a place where employees are respected and trusted and valued and empowered and incented well, and all the things you need to do to create a good quality in the workplace. Well, the employees are going to be loyal and they're going to stay with you. And if you have good entrepreneurial returns, your investors or your shareholders, in the early days of Bioware, that was basically all the employees because we had a share option plan, they'll be happy and they'll continue to support you in that sense, and you'll get more investment. But if you push quality in the workplace to an extreme, so that it's great and no one ever has to really do that much, well, you won't get the products made. You won't have an ROI. If you push the ROI and the entrepreneurial results, well, you're going to be pushing the employees, and you're going to be cutting the quality or cutting the corners potentially to get products out faster, short-term thinking, things like that. So you have to be thinking long-term there as well. And if you're pushing the quality in the products to the point where your employees are working, long shifts and they're never getting time off, and where maybe you spend too much money on the product, so your profitability drops, well, your employees wouldn't be happy, and your investors wouldn't be happy. So it's really about balancing all three of those. And for me, it was a big part of that was being very humble and being high integrity. And I'm not saying we were perfect at that, or anyone's perfect at that, because you can't be. But it's a recognition that you can always get better. It's a recognition of admitting when you're wrong and trying to improve it. Humility, I always saw it as sort of an inward-looking thing, and integrity was sort of an external looking perspective, where you're being honest with there's key stakeholders, your customers, your employees, your investors, PR, the press, and so on.
Wow. So, as I watched that clip, and I've watched it several times now, but I remember the first time I looked at it, I was really struck by the humility aspect of it. I mean, he talks about it very clearly, but it's evident in his actions, in his tone of voice, body language, in the content of what he's saying across the board. That really means something to him personally, and it feels like that's the type of value that he would build a company around. I really look at this clip and at Ray Muzyka, And I think to myself, wow, this is kind of the leader that BioWare and really EA as a whole so desperately needs right now. I mean, number one, he gets games. It's not necessarily evident in this clip, but if you watch other interviews with Ray, it's very clear that he has a very defined understanding of player experience and of storytelling more than just in plot, but the story that exists within gameplay, within combat, within player progression. Even in one different interview, he was talking about, there's a story in how players acquire gear. Even something as simple as leveling up your gear or unlocking new equipment is kind of part of the hero's journey, and it relates to agency and a player feeling invested in their character.
The narrative of customization progression is another story. It's like a hero's journey or a villain's journey, depending on what kind of character you like to play. If you display that, like we're doing, say, on a social site like social.bioware.com, you can actually see sort of the narrative of your hero's journey and display it out. And every player has a different hero's journey. And it's really neat to see the comparison side by side and said, really, you did that at that point. Rather than going here, you went here and you got this cool new suit of armor, and that allowed you to defeat this dragon and allowed you to move on here and talk to these guys and get a new quest and head back. It's like, it's really divergent and it's really interesting.
I mean, someone who thinks like that, who also has a really strong understanding of business. I mean, clearly in this clip, we're seeing him talk about business, but he gets games and he understands business. Obviously, if you don't know, he's moved on to doing angel investing and other types of investing in different startups. So he's got a lot of other things going on right now, and he's moved on from BioWare. There's no way to, I don't think there's any chance of him ever coming back. But you look at someone like that and you think, this is what BioWare needs right now. This doesn't mean that BioWare was perfect in the past. It doesn't mean that they never made mistakes. And it doesn't mean that they're not trying to live up to their values now, because I'm sure that they are. I'm sure if we talked with BioWare now, they would say, absolutely, we still believe in all of this. This is still exactly what we're trying to do. But it feels like something has changed. If we ask ourselves as fans, does BioWare still act with humility? I think that they do sometimes. I think that there's evidence of that. I think that there's evidence of them being receptive to feedback. I think that there's evidence of them being receptive to feedback with Mass Effect Andromeda. I think that they've done a pretty admirable job of correcting some of the things that players had criticism of, that critics had criticism of. But it's also worth noting that, in some sense, shipping the game out the way that they did and thinking that people wouldn't have a major problem with that, I don't know if I would go so far as to call that arrogant, but it's definitely a problem that they perceived that they would be able to ship the game in that state without there being major backlash, and then they wouldn't have to be in the position of having to correct it with patches after the fact. So that begs the question, are they really balancing the needs of their customers and their employees with the needs of their investors or their shareholders, in this case through EA, in the way that Ray talks about with that Venn diagram? It's a hard balance, as he mentions, but are they really as good at balancing that as they used to be? Another thing that really strikes me about it is he talks about growing the company's value, growing the company's brand, and placing more importance on that through quality content than on short-term gain. Does EA really believe that? Is that something that they're really practicing? Is that a part of their strategy? Are they willing to balance return on investment with the belief in making great content to build up the BioWare brand, to rebuild the BioWare brand in this case, even if that's more expensive with more narrow profit margins in the short term? I don't know. I think there's great questions and great skepticism, and there should be great skepticism about that based on some of the actions that EA has taken, specifically the filler content, specifically the side quests that seem as though they are there to add to the total hours played and not necessarily adding to the amount of enjoyment that you get out of playing a game. And at the same time, I don't want to whitewash BioWare of the past. We can't act like BioWare never made mistakes or that they were perfect in the past and that the current BioWare doesn't do anything well. That's not true. BioWare does a lot of things well, and to be honest, they're still one of, if not my favorite, game developers. I really like a lot of the games that they have come out with. And again, as I said earlier, if we talk to the leaders in BioWare today, if we talk to the leadership of EA today, I'm sure that they would espouse these same values. I'm sure they would say, no, we are committed to these values. This is how we want to live, and we think that X, Y, and Z examples show that we are still doing that. And that's fine. I don't think it's fair to criticize them and say that they're not doing any of these things or that they've completely abandoned these values. I don't think that that's true. But I do think that there's a harsh truth that needs to be considered, that is essentially that the results that we're seeing from BioWare no longer match these types of statements about value. BioWare is not where they once were as far as living up to their own values. I don't think they're far off. I don't want this to sound like doom and gloom. I really, really liked Dragon Age Inquisition. I really liked Mass Effect Andromeda. In fact, I say personally I love them. I mean, BioWare still makes games that I love to play. But at the same time, something is amiss. As a long-term BioWare fan, as a long-term Dragon Age and Mass Effect fan, something is just a little off. And in some places, it's a lot off. They do seem to be drifting from these very clear and committed values. They do seem to be drifting from a very clear formula about storytelling that has worked very well for them in the past. And I think if they want to improve the position that they're in, what they should be doing is taking every opportunity that they can get to reassert that they live by these values. And you do that through actions. You do that not just through rhetoric. You do that by putting customers first. And I think if you are aware of what your customers want, if you really know your fans and your consumers, what we want is rich, detailed, impactful story content, not filler content, not empty side quests, not map packs, not more emphasis on multiplayer than on single player, but we want great storytelling content in droves. We want lots of story content, and we want that content to be rich and detailed and to make an emotional impact on us and to show us and present stories filled with believable characters that resonate with people for a long, long time, like the BioWare games of the past. I want to know what you all think about this. Let me know in the comment section down below if you agree with where I'm coming from. Maybe you have a different perspective on it. Let me know. I'm genuinely interested in what you all think about it. I think the real reason why I do this channel is so that I can talk to more people about video games. It's one of my favorite things to do, and if I can help the conversation by starting it off in a reasonably logical and well-reasoned position, then I'm happy to do that. But I really want to know what you all think about it. And as always, thank you for watching, thank you for listening, Macedonis, and until next time.
And I think our culture is founded around our core values of quality in our products, quality in our workplace in a context of humility and integrity. And the quality in products is about making each game better than the last. The quality in the workplace is about making a place where people feel respected, treated as professionals. It's a great place to work. People work hard, they play hard. Humility, about being self-critical, self-aware of the things we build, both of the products and the workplace. Those are the things that endure as BioWare changes. Everything changes at BioWare, but one thing stays the same. That's our culture, our core values, and that's very important to us.